please help me welcome one of our two representatives of the United States Air Force tonight, Tyler Britton.
So I want to tell you a story of how my lust for adventure almost destroyed me. I grew up in a really small town in rural Kansas, and it was quite the booming metropolis. We had a Dairy Queen, stoplight, Pizza Hut, more cows than people, that type of place. And my grandparents traveled a lot, and my grandpa would always bring home these really cool coins from all the places he went, and I got those coins. Now, because of that, that thirst for adventure was just always there. So I decided to join the Air Force. My grandpa was in the Army Air Corps, and so the Air Force sounded like the right thing to do at the time. I was 18. It was my escape from Kansas. So shipped off to basic training, finished all my requirements for basic training, and got assigned the job of cardiopulmonary laboratory technician. Now, at the time, I didn't even know how to spell that, let alone what that even meant. I would quickly find out that meant I was going to be a respiratory therapist. So I would take care of people on breathing machines and people with lung issues. So I finished all my training for that, and then I got reassigned to Lackland Air Force Base in San Antonio, Texas. And I was home on leave in Christmas Eve 2009, and I get a phone call from my commander. And he says, Airman Britton, I have some good news and some bad news. All right, sir, I will take the good news first. You got promoted below the zone to senior airman. Great, that means more money for me. I'll take an early promotion. That's more money. The bad? Well, in 2 weeks, you're headed to Afghanistan. I remember thinking, that's great news. I don't know about this bad news. So 2 weeks later, I left out of San Antonio. It was about 80 degrees. And we flew to Bishkek, Kyrgyzstan. So an old Soviet bloc state. And I remember landing, and it was about -15. And I was only wearing my flight suit, so I was very well prepared for the weather, to say the least. So eventually we get into Afghanistan, and our job is to do what's called critical care transport. So it's me, a respiratory therapist, a critical care nurse, and a physician, and we essentially build an ICU on the back of airplanes and transport critically injured soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines, local nationals, detainees, coalition troops, you name it, whoever needs to be transported, we're the team. So in this first deployment, I was 21, mind you, and it was an adventure. It was great. My doctor was a good old Texas boy, a hick, essentially, and because he was a little backcountry, we called him Philbilly instead of Hillbilly. My nurse, he joined the Air Force about 39 years old, and he was 42 on this deployment, and so he was Papa Bear. And then there was me. My team always said, Britton, you're hungry, you're hairy, and you're kind of stupid. We're going to call you Sasquatch. So very endearing term. So that was my call sign, and it was me and Philbilly and Papa. The joke was I had my 2 gay dads with me, so great deployment. Most missions were about an hour long, and so you were up, you were down, dropped your patient off, and you went about your way. And it was great fun. We traveled all around the world: Iraq, Afghanistan, Kuwait, Qatar, United Arab Emirates, Germany. I was going everywhere, just flying patients around the world, and it was quite the adventure. So I get home from this, and I'm ready for the next one. And in the interim, I did some more travels to Australia and New Zealand and continued to see the world. And then one day in February 2011, 22 years old, I get another phone call. And this time it was, we have another deployment tasking for you if you would like it. Absolutely. So back to Afghanistan, 2011 at 22 years old. And these missions were quite a bit different. And the biggest difference was the mission. We had 8 hours that we would transport these patients for. Our primary mission was from Afghanistan to Germany. And so you have 8 hours with these patients on a big flying tube of steel just to think about everything. You are just staring at the screen of this patient's monitor, and you just have a lot of time to think. And sometimes that can be quite detrimental. And so I started to get angry. This anger was directed at myself. I believed what I was doing was wrong. We were seeing some really, really terrible war casualties, and quite frankly, these young men and women that we were transporting, I was projecting what I believe life to be on them. You know, I actually got to the point where I just pitied them, that what kind of life are they going to have when they get home? And I'm contributing to this. So I didn't believe in what I was doing. I thought what I was doing was inherently bad. And I just got angry. And I was angry all the time. So I get home from this deployment and I get reassigned to Cincinnati, where now I teach people how to do this critical care transport. Mind you, I'm 23 now, teaching people how to do this. Most people are much my superior and senior, so that went over well. And I could never really escape from these missions. So I brought my expertise, because at this point I'd flown about 80 missions. So I was reliving these missions, teaching future respiratory therapists, nurses, and physicians how to do this. We would listen weekly to the teleconference that they held downrange about all the patients that were being transported throughout the continuum of care. And then I decided it'd be a great idea to deploy again. So November 2013, back to Afghanistan. And it was much of the same, except for I'd just become, the anger had kind of went into this emotionless state where I kind of just saw these patients I was transporting as livestock, to be honest. And I get home from this deployment in May of 2014, and because I'm a glutton for punishment, I decided that I would start looking up some of the patients that I'd transported. I remember one gentleman in particular I found on social media. He had lost his right leg and right arm, and he was playing catch with his daughter. And he was actually a bodybuilder. I was like, yeah, well, there's outliers in every population. Great, he's an outlier. And so I went about my day and life, and one day I was in a bar in Over the Rhine, and I had my dog with me, and started sniffing this other dude's dog, and well, sorry about that. And I remember, because I was so incensed at the time, I was like, what happened to your leg? He's like, lost it in Afghanistan. I was like, oh, no shit. Like, when? 2011? I was like, where? Kandahar? Like, when? May. I was like, I may have transported you. Spoiler alert, I did not transport him, but we were in the our paths crossed at some point, at some time, because I was flying patients to Germany. We were flying patients kind of all around Afghanistan and then on to Germany. So the reality is our paths crossed at some point. But he had a great dog. He had a great girlfriend. He had a job, and he was happy. I was like, oh, great, another outlier. And then I got to know this guy better and established a friendship with him. I watched him propose to his girlfriend on top of the Reds dugout at Great American Ballpark. 2 weeks ago, I was at his bachelor party, and this weekend, I'm watching him get married. And so I learned some things from this. The biggest thing being, I don't get to decide what life means to anyone besides me. See, I always projected what I believed to be a fruitful life on the patients I was transporting, and in the reality it was just my job to ensure that they got the ability. They got to make that decision, not me. And so today, I'm very proud of the men and women who have transported all these, quite frankly, thousands of patients through the war zones. And I'm proud of myself. And one of the best parts is I found my adventure.
One more time for Tyler Britton, ladies and gentlemen.